Theron Sarnai. We seem to have resolved the issues that we had, which was keeping us from successfully initiating the stream. I would like for someone to confirm that the stream is audible on the chat window, please. Okay, thank you for that. We will commence in a few moments. We will commence in the next minute or so. We had to resolve, otherwise I would have been speaking but you wouldn't be hearing me, so there wouldn't have been a point in doing the sermon. Fortunate to be disciples of the Buddha. Before we commence the sermon then, let us all take a moment to be upstanding and recite the Dhirassa Vigata Mohassa stanza, by which we affirm our allegiance to the Buddha as his disciples. This is an oath to ourselves more than anything else. It's a promise to ourselves that we will do as he has said. We will conduct ourselves in the manner that he has taught us, all for the purpose of our deliverance from samsara. And that is Dhirassa Vigata Mohassa Pabhinna Khilassa Vijita Vijayassa Anighassa Susamachitassa Buddhasilassa Sadhupanyassa Vesantarassa Vimalassa Bhagavato tassa Savako hamasmi. Dhirassa Vigata Mohasamachittassa Vesantarassa Dhirassa Vigata Mohassa Pabhinna Khilassa Vijita Vijayassa Anighassa Susamachitassa Buddhasilassa Sadhupanyassa Vesantarassa Vimalassa Bhagavato tassa Savakohamasmi. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. And now to observe the precepts, let us all take a moment to seek the refuge of the Noble Triple Gem, followed by the observance of the precepts. And in order to do so, please recite all together and after me. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranang. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Sarana gamanang sampunnang. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinnadana diyami. Dang samadhiyami. Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Surameraya majjapama dattana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Tisaranena saddhing panchasilang dhammang sadukang surakkitang katva appamadena sampadeta. Okay, you may all be seated now. And also, before we commence today's sermon, let us all take a moment to invite all the devas, brahmas, spirits, demons, and those who have predeceased us. It may be that they are unfortunate enough to be born in the woeful plains and are today destitute in samsara without any hope, without any help to redeem themselves from suffering, and that may be due to insufficient merits. So therefore, before we commence this sermon, let us all invite them to join us. May those devas, brahmas, and others who are in the blissful plane be able to listen to the teaching of the Buddha and attain the noble fruits. And for those who are in the woeful plane, may they be able to attend this meritorious event, witness the meritorious deed as it unfolds, preaching the Dhamma and so on. And may they all be able to listen to the teaching of the Buddha. May they understand it, may they comprehend it, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. So with that, resolve in mind, with compassionate thoughts towards all those beings in these 10,000 world systems. As I now make this invitation, I ask you all to extend that invitation in your hearts and in your minds out to all those beings. If anyone is within earshot of this sermon, may they be able to join us. May they witness the meritorious deed. Anta chakravalesu atra gacchantu devata saddhammang munirajansa sunantu sagga mokkadang dhammasavana kalo ayang bhadanta Dhamma savana kalo ayang bhadanta Dhamma savana kalo ayang bhadanta. And also, as we normally do before we commence a sermon, let us all take a moment to seek forgiveness from the Noble Ones for any acts of revile that we might have directed towards them. And in order to do so with humility and humbleness, deep-seated within your minds, and considering for a moment that although our lives have changed as a result of the Dhamma touching it, considering the kind of people we used to be before we had the refuge of the Dhamma, having virtually all our relationships been and associations been with immoral, ignoble people who defiled our minds with raga, dvesha, moha, desire, aversion and delusion, and having been blinded with ignorance and attachment, countless times we may have offended the Noble Ones, the Noble Triple Gem, as well as the Sama Sambuddhas, the Pacheka Buddhas, Arahata Buddhas, Anagamis, Sakrudagamis and Sotapannas, be they on the path or having attained the fruits, as well as the Buddha's ministry, the Sambuddha Shasana, for any thoughts, words or actions of revile, desecration, slander that we might have directed towards them, either knowingly or unknowingly. The consequences of such actions may be that today, as we make efforts to understand the Buddha's teaching, these efforts are hindered, our progress is slowed down, and our path to deliverance is made difficult. So therefore, before we commence, let us all take a moment to acknowledge that this is who we would have been, accept and acknowledge that we have not always been the good and kind-hearted folk that we may be today, and let us take a moment to seek the forgiveness from the Noble Ones, as well as the Noble Triple Gem, for any thoughts, words or actions of revile and desecration that we might have directed towards them. So let us all take a moment. Let us take a minute to do this. Okay. And finally, let us all make a firm resolve that may through the course of this sermon, if there are those among you who are yet to achieve the noble state of Sotapanna, may through the course of this sermon you be able to penetrate and see the truth that was expounded by the Buddha. May you be able to understand it and comprehend it, and may you be able to break through the shackles of samsara once and for all, and attain the noble state of Sotapanna. And for those among you who have already achieved that noble state, may through the course of this sermon you be able to fulfill the subsequent stages, and may we all be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. So with that resolve in mind, I invite you all prepare yourselves to listen to this sermon. Okay. So as I normally do, this is a gentle reminder to put away any distractions that you might have with you, including electronic devices, TV. If you're listening to this on your computer or a laptop, perhaps you have other tabs or the browsers open, maybe you're multitasking. My suggestion would be you pick one or the other, because it is going to be extremely difficult to understand and comprehend the teaching if your mind is split between two things and it's trying to multitask, because essentially there is no such thing as multitasking and it is overrated. So we have spoken about this in the past. I'm not going to go into it in any great length, but I have promised you that I will remind you for as long as we do these sessions in this format. Just as a gentle reminder, please put aside any distractions that you might have, and perhaps make other members you have at home aware that you are in the midst of a sermon, and unless there's an extreme emergency, it would be ideal if perhaps you could be left alone and without interruption. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you have done that, and you're well prepared to spend the next 1.5 to 2 hours to make good the errors in our ways and to set ourselves up in the right way, on the right path, so that the next week, the upcoming week, can be spent wisely and fruitfully. Now, I did ask on the sermon last week, for those of you who don't have a timetable, to make it a priority to prepare a timetable. As I reminded you, a timetable is not only important when you have a lot of things to do, so you know which things to be focusing on at what times, so that everything gets done. But also I reminded you that a timetable is also essential when you have a lot of free time and you have nothing else to do, because then, whether you have things to do or not, time is just ticking by, and unless you are an arahant, whether you have worldly and material obligations and commitments to attend to or not, there is always the undone task of attaining arahathood, in other words, attaining freedom, attaining liberation, attaining a mental state of being freed from suffering. That undone task is always left for anyone who is not an arahant to do. And it's not like you're going to get some special time for that at the end of all the other time that we have spent doing everything else, looking after our families and friends, helping everyone else in the world. It's not like we're going to get some extra time at the end, so that, like time reserved for Nibbana. That's not going to happen. In the time that we have to live, we are going to have to get all of these things done. So we have to fulfill our duties and our obligations. We have to look after each other, do the best we can to help each other. We have to be kind and generous and helpful, and tend to those who need our help, to the weak and the poor. So we need to do all of those things, and over and above all that, we must also focus on our salvation. So there is no added time or extra time or separate time to do this. Now is the time to do all of this. So a timetable, this is why, is very important, so that your free time, which you're not going to have for very long, in the grand scheme of things, perhaps this is going to last the next month, the next 2 months, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, maybe the next year, 2 years, who knows. But in the grand scheme of things, this is nothing. This is nothing in the grand scheme of things. So, timetable again. Okay, so I'm hoping you've all done as I suggested, and you have a timetable to work to. If you don't have one, I'm sorry to say, it's your loss. If you do have a timetable to work to, then continue to develop on it. It may be a very rudimentary timetable, maybe quite a preliminary one to begin with, but as you go through the course of the following weeks, start filling in, fine-tune it as you deem will guide you, and make sure that the things you need to get done do get done. Alright, so I think you will also remember that last week I did raise your awareness to some concerns that we should all be aware of, concerns that I felt were things that might affect you, both young and middle-aged and the elderly, at a time when you are confined to the four walls of your home, which is another way of saying to the sofa with your TV in front of you. There are very imminent dangers lurking in the dark, deep corners, because you have the sensuality monster, the sensual monster, the demon. It's a prime opportunity for the Asat Purushas, ignoble people, to prey on your free time, to prey on your willingness to offer, making use of these opportunities to fill your minds and your brains and your heads with sensuality and thoughts around that. And with each of these messages that come out to you, they will ignite in you the fire of sensual desire. So I did warn you, because I do really feel that it can be a huge concern, particularly in this time. So I did warn you to watch out for that, not just yourselves, but also particularly your children. And I continued to think around this matter, and what I also felt was, this is a time where, particularly those of you who have been following the teachings that we have been expounding, so in other words, the teaching of the Buddha, I believe that you all are genuinely interested in walking the path of Nibbana and achieving that salvation. So when one walks the path of Nibbana, this notion of a self begins to dwindle. As we progress on the path to Nibbana, and as ego gets what it deserves, so the treatment that it needs, then as the size of one's ego begins to reduce, the things that we do become less about us and more about everyone else. The size of your ego determines how much of what you do is for your own benefit. And I'm not necessarily talking about Nibbana here, because of course Nibbana is all about one's benefit to oneself, and in doing so, benefiting others. Okay, so it's about looking after myself for you. I think you'll remember we've spoken about this in the past. We don't look after each other, but rather we look after ourselves for the other. So Nibbana is all about that. But in other sense, it becomes less about us and more about everyone else. Because the notion of a self is what forces us to do things for the preservation of the self. When there's no self to preserve. I'd like to jog your memory about the story of baby Natasha. Remember when the mother thought, well, we say mother, but you know that she was no mother at all, because she was only a mother in her own mind. In her mental world, she was a mother, but to anyone else in a sane mind, she was just another lady. She was just a woman, another lady. But she was a mother in her mental world, and in this mental world, she became a mother because she created a baby. She fabricated a baby, this baby Natasha, in her mind. Excuse me. So you will recall from the story that when she had the baby, of course, I mean mentally, so I'm not going to keep saying that, I think it is implied if you know the story. So when she had the baby, everything she did was on behalf of the baby. For those of you who have had children or have children, you will know this as parents, how the time that you had to yourself, the moment you became a parent, either a mother or a father, how much of that time you actually dedicated towards your children. It was not a gradual shift of time. You remember it was almost overnight, from going to becoming, from the moment you realized that perhaps you were pregnant, you were with child. From that moment on, all your thoughts, actions, and your words, they were anchored around this event of bringing a child into this world, and you becoming a mother, and you having a child, or you becoming a father and having to father this child. So when baby Natasha's mother it seems funny that we are giving a name to a child that actually doesn't exist, but we don't seem to have a name for the lady that actually does exist. So not Lady Natasha, baby Natasha's mother, I suppose you could call her Lady Natasha. Baby Natasha's mother, when she was a mother, so I say when she was a mother because for those of you who know the story, what happened to this child was the child died. She stopped mentally fabricating this child, right? So because when she got the treatment from her psychiatrist, she didn't know it was a psychiatrist she was getting treatment from. She thought she was taking her baby to a pediatrician, a baby doctor, children's doctor, and she was taking meds so that it would be good for her children or for her child, for the baby. But lo and behold, weeks and months after she started taking her drugs, she slowly began to realize that this idea or this child was something that she was mentally fabricating. Okay, so you all know the story. But what my point here is, when she thought she had a child, or when she knew, I think we can use the word knew because yes, it was knowledge, but it was wrong knowledge. So nevertheless, it's still new. So when she knew she was a mother, when she knew she had this baby, pretty much everything she did, said, and thought was centered around this child. And this is why I say, as parents, you will remember this time in your life, from becoming pregnant to delivering your child and everything after that. Everything, your world sort of centered around your child, your children, and everything was about them. So likewise, when you have a self, and when you have a big self, the size of yourself rather determines how much of what you do is about yourself and how much of what you do is about others. This is why I said a few minutes ago that the less self you have, the less the notion of a self you have, the smaller yourself, the more excuse me, more of what you do is about yourself, or rather less of what you do is about yourself and more of what you do is about others. So when we practice the path, you will begin to realize this shift within you. Sometimes, I'll give you an example of where you will begin to notice these subtle changes. When, for instance, you are expected to work on something, let's say you are at home and you have some chores to attend to, or you are just going about doing something. Let's say you are perhaps a better example might be a Shramadana, okay, which is where people come together and they're volunteering their time. So this is a voluntary task, for charity, and you're doing something together. Maybe your neighborhood, people in the neighborhood getting together, and you're all working towards a purpose. So now considering, just take this example for a moment, and I want you to imagine this. Most of you will probably have got involved in a Shramadana, but I want you to think about this example, where let's say you are working together with a group of people, and let's say perhaps your task at this moment, so there's a little garden that you're trying to clear out. So it's a common garden. Everyone in the neighborhood uses this area, and your task right now is to clear out or rather to plant some seeds, and others are working on other tasks. And you pick this task because you actually quite enjoy doing that. It's very soothing, very healing. So you've got a small spade in your hand, and you're digging the soil, planting the seeds, you're covering it up with the soil, adding some fertilizer maybe, or maybe some water, and you're really enjoying this task. Okay, so you continue doing this for a few minutes, and then someone comes along. You've only started this, but you have been doing it for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but you really enjoy this. So someone comes along and says, actually, you know what, this is not where we need you. We need you somewhere else. We need you to go and sweep. Um, we need to go and sweep the road, just adjoining the garden. So at that moment in time, considering you're really enjoying the task you're doing right now, think about how you might feel when there's a call for you to go and do something which requires you to stop doing what you like doing, and now you have to go and attend to something else. You can gauge the size of your ego or the size of yourself when faced with tasks like this. See, as much as we believe that a Shramadana is about coming together and serve and doing our bit to save, not to save, but rather to serve, to serve the community, to serve the greater masses, to serve everyone in the neighborhood, the size of yourself, by the size of yourself, I don't mean how big you are. The size of yourself, the self we're talking about here, the baby Natasha, the size of yourself determines how much you're actually doing a Shramadana. Because the dana is actually charity, where you're actually giving something away. How much of what you're doing is about giving, and how much of what you're doing is actually about taking. Because if you're really enjoying what you're doing, if you're really attached to what you're doing, and every time you dig that ground, because you really enjoy that task. Every time you dig the soil, every time you plant a seed, every time you cover it up and put some water, if you're really enjoying this task, then the truth is this activity is very soothing, because it's feeding yourself. It's feeding your baby Natasha. This is food for the soul. By soul I mean the self here. This is food for the soul, food for the self. So this is why when you're asked to stop doing what you're doing and go and tend to something else, there you will sense some reluctance, more or less. For some it will be easy to stomach. Some might say, okay, all right, okay, I'll go do it. So you'll sense a slight amount of reluctance, but your preference is still to be doing what you're doing now. But you will go and pick up the broom or the ekal broom or whatever, and you'll start sweeping. But your mind you left behind by where you were planting the seeds. So this is still your preference, but you're doing something that you're asked to do. When you work on yourself, again self as in self, not yourself, self. So when you're working on this self, by practicing the Dhamma, and as the size of the self reduces, you become unselfishness. So when you have a self, that's when you become selfish. And when you have no self, then selfless. And the feeling of wanting to foster the self, that would be selfishness. Foster the self at the expense of others, perhaps. So unselfish is when the size of the self reduces and you are more interested in the benefit of your actions towards others. So you're more altruistic than wanting to feed the self. So you will sense then on this occasion the size. You will be able to gauge the size of yourself, because quite a few of you will be interested in, how do I measure the size of myself? You can't use a weighing scale. You can't use a measuring tape. You can't use any of the physical instruments there are to measure this. But these events where you are doing something and then you are asked to stop doing it and do something else is a good indicator, is a good situation which you can use to gauge the size of yourself. Now it could also be at the workplace. Those of you who have, some of you will be able to relate to what I'm about to say. Have you never had those days where you sit down at your desk and you start some work, 2 minutes in, someone comes and interrupts, and they want you to do something else, and it's urgent, always. It's always urgent. So now you need to work on that. And as you put all of the stuff away and you start working on this new task, then this person who's just talked to you, they leave you with this task, and you're now working on this. Again, a few minutes into this, someone else comes along and says, actually, you know what, this is what we want you to be doing now. And then you say, oh well, I only just started on this task, but hey, if you need me to do this, I'll do that. So then you start working on the third task, and then perhaps maybe the second person that came to you comes back to you and says, hey, what's the update? What have you been doing? Have you finished what I asked you to do? And then you have to say, well, actually, the other guy came and asked me to do this other thing. And then perhaps you'll be told, well, no, actually, don't worry about that task. This is the task you need to be working on now. So please, can you go back and attend to this and make sure it gets done? I'm sure every one of you, if you've been in the workplace, will have experienced this more or less, where you have to keep jumping from one task to the other. And at very short notice, or sometimes no notice at all. These are times which can be stressful. If you have experienced these situations, you will know what I'm talking about. Stressful, very annoying, and very distracting, because you're so many things at the same time. Can you please let me finish one thing and then I'll come back to the other? Right. So these are things that you'll be accustomed to saying. Now, I'm not going to disagree that to get anything done, it's better to actually focus on one thing and continue to work on that until you have finished it, or at least until you have come to a natural point where you can pause it and then resume it at a later point. I wouldn't disagree with that, but what I'm trying to say is these are good events and situations for you to gauge the size of yourself, because what I'll be talking to you about today, and hopefully some of this will start to make more sense as we to ourselves that it's me and I who's working on this task, and I've got so much left to do, and I've done so much. Now what we're doing is, rather than focusing on what it is that needs to get done now, you're talking about what you have done there for the past. You're talking about what is yet to be done. So you're talking about the future, and then this looks like a mammoth task, because you have a past during which you were able to complete part of that task. So that task is part of the task you're working on right now, surely, because you just completed that. And then you look into the future, and now you have all this work that's left to do. So when you're asked, can I please ask you to stop that and do something else, or very abruptly asked to shift your attention from one thing to the other, what happens is this self that we all have within ourselves looks at the past, big task, looks at the future, oh, big task, I'm in the middle of a big task, so therefore I am unable to attend to what you want to do. Or worst of all, if you are unable to voice your dissatisfaction about something like that, perhaps maybe to your seniors, then what you'll do is you'll just keep shut, and you will agree to do the task that you have been asked to do now, but you won't be doing it happily. Most of the time you'll be doing it annoyedly, and with plenty of resentment. What I'm trying to show you, folks, is this is all to do with this false notion of a self. What do I mean by this? Let me detail this for you. What do I mean by this? To help answer this question, I want you all to take a moment and think about the next question I'm about to ask you. So I imagine you're all seated somewhere right now. There may be some of you who are seated on a sofa, or maybe you're seated on the floor. Maybe some of you were seated on the bed and now you're fast asleep. Bed is bad choice for listening to the Dhamma. So if you're still awake, then I suggest you shift from bed to somewhere else. But that's a side point. But wherever you are seated right now, here's a question I have for you. So I want you to think about this. Okay? I'm choosing my words very carefully. Therefore, I don't want you to stray and try and make the question up in other words that you understand. I want you to take what I ask you, this question word for word, because these words are very carefully chosen, and I want you to think about what I'm asking you and come up with an answer. Okay, so if you're ready, here's the question. I'm going to assume you're sitting on a chair, and the question is, who's sitting on the chair? That's it. Yeah, that's the question. Who is it that's sitting on the chair? Most of you will say, well, yeah, it's me, Swaminatha. I'm sitting on the chair. Okay, and I'm going to say there's nothing wrong with that. If that is the answer that you have come up with, then great, because what I gave is incorrect. So the question again was, who's seated on the chair? And if the answer to the question is, well, I am seated on the chair, then I want you to pay attention to the next hour of this sermon, where I will try and attempt to explain to you why your answer is flawed. Now, before that, let us perhaps replace you with favorite Arahant. And let's now ask the same question. Who is seated on that chair? And either the Buddha or the Arahant will answer, I am seated on the chair, Swaminatha. The answer that they have given is correct. But the answer that you gave is incorrect. Because I asked you the question, who's seated on the chair? And you said, I am seated on the chair, Swaminatha. When we asked the Arahant, who's seated on the chair, Bhante? He said, I am seated on the chair, Swaminatha. His answer was correct, but your answer is incorrect. Don't worry. Let's try and understand what we mean by this. Let's unwrap this, let's unravel it, and I will help you understand what it is that I'm trying to express by sharing these ideas with you. And in doing so, you will begin to realize what I meant by the previous examples of where you're working in a Shramadana or working at the office, and you're asked to shift from one thing to the other, and at one point it may be that you become annoyed and frustrated and begin to think, why is everyone asking me to do all these things? I need to focus on one piece of work. This is just so annoying. As I said, it'll help you to gauge the size of yourself or your ego. Okay, so let me explain to you what I mean by this. Now, let's go back to you seated on the chair. Okay, so in your mental eye, look at yourself. So look at yourself as an observer. So imagine there's a copy of yourself seated right opposite to you, looking towards you then, and so that's the observer. So really my questions, or rather you are the observer, and you're looking at this copy of yourself that's seated opposite to you. So I'm now going to ask you a question again. Okay, so you can now open your eyes and you'll see that there's a copy of you sat right opposite to you or in front of you. Now let me ask you the question, who's seated on the chair? And again the answer may be, I am seated on the chair. Or you'll say, the copy of me. I'm only using this copy business to help explain the idea. So you don't necessarily need to think that it's a copy, just think it's yourself. Okay, so that's exactly you seated on the chair. So of course you're going to say then, it's me, I am seated on the chair. Now, let's take a moment and really check and verify if what we have just said is true. Does it hold water? Okay, so let's look at this person that's seated on the chair. This is seated opposite to you. Yes, I know, very good looking and all that. Yeah. Okay. So this person that we are now looking at, which bit of what you're seeing is you? What do I mean? Let me explain. So let's look at this person from head to toe. Starting off with the head, you can see some hair, maybe. Then you can see the head, hopefully. Then you have the eyes, ears, nose, hopefully not the tongue. That's sealed right inside the mouth, carefully. And you can see shoulders and the upper part of the body. There's the arms. Can you see the left arm? Yeah, that one. And then the right arm. Yeah. And then the hands and all the digits of the hands. Okay. Then down towards their navel and the middle part of their body, and then further down towards the legs, both legs and the feet, toes. Right, so that's you, right? That's that person. That's the I. Yeah? Okay, which part of that is the I? Which part of that is you? Is it all of it? Or is it some of it? Is it most of it? Let's find out. So, how do we find out? How about we take all the hair off. So we shave them, bald headed, right? So in your mental eye, let's take out all the hair, hair on the head, right? All the hair on the head, all that is now removed. So now you have a bald headed person. What happened to the I? In other words, you told me that that person seated on the chair was you. So that's the self, right? That's myself, okay? So we have now removed the hair from the head. What has happened to myself? Has myself gone down in size? Do you feel less myself now? Or do you not feel any different? I'm not talking about I can now rub my head and I don't feel any hair. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the feeling of the self. This feeling. You'll all sense a feeling of self within you. You know, like, I am here. You know, this is me. You know, here I am, this is me. Right? So you can sense the self. Now, when we remove the hair from the head, has anything happened to the self? Has the self, you know, if let's say the weight of the hair that we just shaved from this person's head was, let's say, 500 grams. Has your self reduced by 500 grams? Are you feeling less yourself now? I mean, if that were true, then it's very easy to rid oneself of the self. All you need to do is just, keep taking bits out. You take off the hair, you take off the head, take off the scalp, and the neck and the shoulders and all the other systems, the muscles, the bones, the veins, the rest of it. And once you've gone head to toe, now that's it. Then there's no more self. But you clearly know that this is not true. Take the example of, say, someone who's handicapped, okay, or maybe, say, a soldier who used to serve in the army, and for some unfortunate event, and they lost a limb. Okay, so this person who's lost a limb, are they feeling less of a self? Are they feeling the self, or are they feeling less of a presence of a self than they used to when they had all 4 limbs attached to their body? Because if that were the case, then the less limbs you have, the closer to you are to becoming an arahant. Surely. Or the less teeth you have in your mouth, the closer to you are to becoming an arahant. Right? Surely. So, and also, in which case, when you were younger, when you were smaller in size physically, you were more an arahant than you are now. Why? Because, there was less of you. Now there's more of you. body mass has increased, the number of body cells are all, they've all gone up and in size and number. So is that the self? Is what you're looking at yourself? In your mental image, is that yourself? What if we let's take this person for a shower. You don't need to be shy because it's the same person as you, right? So you can get in the shower with them, don't worry. So you're in the shower now, and we give them a shower, right? Wash them head to toe, right? Give them a good scrub and shampoo and soap and the full works. Okay, so you wash them, give them a good wash for about 10-15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, and then we wipe them, get all the water out, and then we bring them back. Now if you used a good scale or a good weighing scale, which is very precise, then it's going to tell you that the body weight has reduced by quite a bit. It'll show you at least 1 to 1.5 kilos has reduced in body weight. This is because a lot of the dead skin cells that was on the outside of the body, as well as some body hair, will have been washed away. Particularly if you gave a good scrub, right? All that dead skin cells, all of that would have been washed away. So now what has happened to the self? So if that is you that you're looking at, so we brought them back, put them back on the chair, and now you're sitting in your chair, now you're looking at this person. Excuse me. Are you feeling less of a self now than before? No change, huh? Same. So that tells us something, does it not? Because if you're now feeling less of a self, then the less body mass you have, the less of a self you ought to feel, and therefore the more an arahant you are. I mean, by that argument, microscopic animals are closer to becoming arahants than devas and brahmas, who are sometimes massive, and they take up like huge parts of the universe. That's how big they are, because they're just masses of energy. Okay, so you can see this is not true. It doesn't make sense to look at the body weight or the body mass or the body size of someone and say that what I'm looking at, what I'm seeing, is the self. Also, if what you're seeing is the self, how about if you take that person and mass or what they carried within them, feces and the urine, that's all now been excreted. So has the self reduced in size? Of course not. This is, of course not. So this tells us then that the body that we all have, this is not the self that we experience. Do we experience a self? Of course. I mean, that's what you feel. You feel a self, do you not? You feel a self. You feel the presence of an I. I'm here. Me. I'm here. This is me. Hello, this is me. I'm here. And when you're feeling emotions, I say you're feeling emotions like love or anger or envy, jealousy. When you're feeling strong emotions, you will, that person-like thing that you feel on the inside, who's actually feeling, that's the self we're talking about here. Sometimes you feel like, I wish I didn't feel this way. I wish I didn't feel this way. You're talking about this person that is actually feeling these emotions. That is the baby Natasha, the fabricated self. But what I'm trying to show you here then is, as beings who all experience a self, we all feel the presence of a self, the body that we all have, that cannot be the self based on the facts that we have just talked about. Based on the evidence that we have just gone through, the physical body just cannot be the self, because if that were the case, then things that we do to the body has to determine the size of the self. As I said, if a soldier or anyone else for that matter lost a limb, then they have less of a self than someone who has all 4 limbs. How many limbs did the Buddha have? All the way up until he entered Parinibbana. From the day he was born to the day he passed away, he had all 4 limbs. But when he became an Arahant, no longer did he experience a self. How much did he change physically? Not much. Of course, by the age of 35, he had matured, and physically, except for perhaps the 32 features that only a Buddha would possess, I remember reading that some of those features only became prominent after he actually became the Buddha. Whether that is true or not, physically, as a human being and as someone with the body of a male, he would have matured fully physically even a moment before he became the Buddha. But the moment after he has become a Buddha, there he does not experience a self. But a moment before that, he experiences a self. And as we said, all 4 limbs were fully attached and were fully functional even until his last moments. So the physical body therefore cannot be the self. I think you will all agree with me based on what we have discussed here. Why then, that being the case, do we feel so offended, perhaps, if someone might look at you and say, "Oh God, you're ugly"? If someone were to say those words, utter those words to you, how does that make you feel? Has anyone actually said that to you? "Oh God, you're ugly"? If someone has, then how did that make you feel? Right next to our school. Okay, you know what we are like. Young boys in young age. Sometimes when we wanted to make fun of the girls after school, so obviously both schools finished at the same time. So we used to come out of this gate, the girls used to come out of the other gate. Used to say past comments like, "Your face is fitting for a poster in hell." I know, terrible things to say, but those were things that was said in a jovial way. I can see that it's not funny, certainly not funny, but those were things we said, and some of them did take offense to that. In some countries, to pass a comment like, "Hey, you've put on a bit," is really offensive. It's really offensive. Which I learned the hard way. When I actually passed that comment to someone I met in the UK, I thought we were really good friends, and we were until I made that comment. So I said, "Hey, it's been a while since I last saw you. It looks like you put on a bit." And unfortunately, that's the last day he spoke with me. So, because then it was only someone else that pointed out, "Hey, you don't say things like that to people." I was like, "What do you mean you don't say things like that?" "I used to say that to my friends back in Sri Lanka all the time." And you could see how his jaw dropped. He was gobsmacked by what I said. "How can you be so offensive to someone? Is that your culture?" I said, "No, people don't find things like that as offensive. I mean, that's just out of fun." And in some countries, being big is a sign of prosperity. If you are big made, if you have a big size body, then that's the sign of prosperity in some countries, particularly in countries where they don't have a lot of perhaps food and other resources. It can be considered that to be commented on something like "you put on a bit" is actually a compliment. But either way, compliment. Why is it people think that it's a compliment when someone says, "You look really good today. You look beautiful. You look gorgeous." Particularly ladies, right? You see this a lot in society, and it's even customary for someone to appreciate. It's kind of like the dumb thing. You have to appreciate someone when you see them. You don't find that in parties. When you go to a party, right? You actually go there looking for appreciation, and the food, right? So if you have taken a lot of time dressing yourself up, right? New sari or new jacket, new dress, right? All glittering and fancy. Put on all the makeup and the jewelry, all that, right? You went to the salon to get your hair and all that done, right? Then you go to the party and everyone comes along and people are talking about each other. Hey, look at that person, look at this person, look at how beautiful it is, and no one makes a comment about you. How would that make you feel? And not just the ladies, the husbands would know this. Because usually, where a comment has not been made, a compliment has not been made, then usually the journey back from the party is very quiet. As opposed to the journey to the party, which is very loud, but on the way back it's very quiet. Right? So the husbands will know this. Long face after that. She said, like, what's wrong? No, nothing. No, come on, tell me, seriously, what's wrong? And then after a series of questions, you will get the real answer. After all this I've done to dress up myself and all the jewelry and the makeup and the hair and all the hours I spent and all the money I spent at the salon, no one, not a single person took any effort to pass a single comment to at least say you look nice today. See, so people look for that. So you look for appreciation. I mean, look at even, from time to time you have this fashion trends, right? So sometimes it's baggy. I remember when my dad was younger, I have a picture of him, not now, at home we had a picture of him when he was in his 20s, and that was a time when they had bell bottoms. So for those who don't know, bell bottoms is not where you wear bells on your bottoms. It's a way of trouser. It's a trouser fashion trend where the legs the circumference increases as you go towards the ankles. Okay, so they're wider at the ankles than they are at the hips. So that's what a bell bottom is. Just in case you were thinking that it's like someone's wearing bells on their bottoms. No, it's not that. If you don't know, go and ask your grandparents or perhaps your parents. They might have some pictures, young children. So anyway, I remember a picture from when my dad was younger. In his younger years, he used to wear bell bottoms, and so these fashion trends they change. You don't see people walking around bell bottoms these days. Right? Then you had the 3/4. Right? You remember those days? That was when I was at school. And then some people used to be very complimentary of it, and some people used to be very offensive about it. Some people used to say, "Oh, that's nice, interesting, nice, good style," and others used to say, is it flooding in your area? These are some of the things I used to say. As a very, it was a demeaning comment to make something like that, to say something like that. And also, some other times, not necessarily fashion, but physical attributes like the size of your body, or maybe if you're a short person, or if you're a tall person, right? Relatively, again, tall and short is relative, but if you're someone average, usually you will attract some comments from society. Come on, you can't not agree with me. We've all been on the receiving end of some of these things. I remember when I was at school, they called me Otua, which is a word for camel, because I used to be quite tall among the rest of my friends at school. Some others called me giraffe. Yeah, so everyone's had these names, particularly in Sri Lanka. I don't think there's any school-going child who doesn't have a nickname. unless he's the only child in class. So, these nicknames are usually names that define or demonstrate certain physical attributes about you. And usually the person on the receiving end of this can either be offended by this, or they can be complimented by it. They feel good about it. Okay? So, point here being, how can that be when the body is not the self? So here's what I want you to think about. Are these comments, are these compliments, and are these offenses misplaced? Are they? I want you to think about it. If you begin to understand and actually really think about what I'm saying here, a lot of the problems that you experience in terms of, like these remarks that people pass to you and these comments that people make about you, they will start to feel so insignificant. Excuse me. Or perhaps, let's say, you're bald-headed. Usually that draws a remark. In Sri Lanka you'll be called Tatya, because that's the word for a bald-headed man, but an offensive term. Okay, so as a monk, that's probably what some people call us now, Tatyas. But the thing is this: who's the monk? Or is this me? This body? Is this myself? This body that I use, and I use that word very, very thoughtfully. I told you right at the beginning, right? I'm very careful about the words I'm using here, so I want you to think along those terms. Why do I use those words? This body that I use, is it me? Or is me the body? Or is, am I the body, or is this a body that I use? Right, let's just assume that the mind is me for the time being. Okay, let's assume that the mind is me. Of course, there's mind and body. Okay, so let's assume that the mind is me. Only an assumption for now. If the mind is me, then isn't the body something that the mind uses when the mind wants to go places? When the mind wants to see the world, hear the world, smell the world, taste the world, feel the world, heal the world? Isn't the mind using the body to get its things done? So ultimately, is it not a vehicle? Is it not a tool? Is it not some instrument or some equipment that the mind uses to achieve its wants and needs? So how can you think that the body is the self? I'm giving you time to think. So how do we think that this body is the self? Is it not because we consider the body to be the self, we get offended when people pass remarks about it? If you're a short guy, you usually get called kota. And if you're a tall guy, you get called otua or giraffe. If you're a fat guy, you get called alia. Right? You know these things, right? So particularly if you've been born and bred in Sri Lanka, or if you spend a large part of your life here, people will pass on these comments because they think it's funny, or they think, after all, there's a whole lot of ego behind it on both sides, and we'll talk about that later. Okay, a person who, no, actually I'm not going to go there now, because if I bring that into the picture, then this is going to be more than you can handle for most of you. So I'm not going to, let's not talk about that as in, why do people pass these comments? Why do people make remarks about physical attributes and about other attributes that they observe, and why do they pass these undermining comments? Why do they make remarks like that? We'll talk about that later. Why do they be sarcastic about certain things? We'll talk about that later, because that's a whole subject on its own to do with ego. But let's talk about what happens to us when we hear such things. And my question to you is this: is this not because, do we not feel this way because we hold on strongly to the idea, to the notion that this physical body is the self? When a person ages, okay, so baby goes into a teenager, adolescence, early adult, then middle-aged adult, then an elderly person. What's aged? Who aged? I use my words very carefully. That's why I want you to think about them. Who aged? Did you age? Actually, are you and I the same age, or are we different ages? So I'm in my 30s. So let's say you're in your 40s. Are you older than me? Am I younger than you? Or if you're in your 20s, am I elder than you? Am I older than you? Or are you younger than me? Excuse me. If the answer to these questions is yes, then my question again back to you is, who is 20 years of age? Is it you? Who's 30 years of age? Is it me? Who's 40 years of age? Is that you again? Who aged? Is it you, or is it the body that aged? So, if you're thinking of yourself in terms of your age, and it's like when you feel, okay? I don't mean feel because, sometimes people feel old, okay? Because, say, they're feeling weak and frail and, can't go about doing day-to-day things, and the body starts to shake and tremble. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, say someone who's in their late 40s, but, fully capable, right? Has full control of all their, the entirety of their body, right? So there's no reason why this person has to feel old. No ailments, nothing like that. But still, this person feels old. Feels how old? 45 years old. Why? Is it not because they consider that their body is them? In other words, the body is myself. This is me. I am my body. Or my body is me. My body is the self. Because the truth of the matter is, I've probably come along in samsara as long as you have, and as long as everyone else has. We've all probably come along in samsara, give or take the same amount of time. So, does that not make us all the same age? Are we not all contemporaries? The arahants who were, they passed away. So, actually, that's the point where you stop aging, is it not? You stop aging at the point of not only becoming an arahant, but becoming an arahant and entering parinibbana. So when an arahant passes away, isn't that the point when one stops aging? I'm talking about true age. I want you to think about these things. I'm not expecting that you're all going to get this like the moment I say it, but we need to start thinking about these things. Because it'll have, within these words, you will, hopefully, through wisdom, you'll be able to see that there are answers to a lot of your problems. Long time ago, someone in our English sermons came and asked me, Swaminatha, can you talk to us about the Satara Satipatthana. So I'm making a start. Much of what I'm talking to you about now is to do with Kaya Anupassana, which is the reflection of the body, but not just, there's the conventional way of doing this, where reflection of the body or the body parts, people do this. They look at the hair, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, or nails and blood and the rest of the 32 parts of the body, and then to consider them to be revolting, disgusting, yucky. This is not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is, I want you to find yourself, because it seems to be that a lot of you out there consider this physical body to be the self. Which is, how do I know this? I mean, you could say, Swaminatha, no, we don't think like that. How can you say that? Well, then why is it when someone calls you fat, when someone says, you're fat, aren't you? Why does that offend you? Or when someone says, yeah, you're short for your age, aren't you? Why does that offend you? Especially when there's that little smile or that laugh at the end. Why does that offend you? Silence is to think. Reflect. Why is it that when you go and stand in front of the mirror and you start to see grey hairs appearing on your chin, on your head, on your chest, right? Why do you find that unsettling? Why do some of you start picking those hairs out? Come on, you all done that. Now when you saw that first flock of grey hair on your head, you can't tell me you didn't pull that out. Why? Because you aged, huh? You aged? What aged again? Sorry, who aged? Oh, it's the question, what aged? Which do you think is the more appropriate question to ask? Who aged or what aged? And what I'm trying to do is to try and help you to shift from being able to answer one question to being able to answer the other question, because you can only really answer one of these two questions. If you can answer one of these questions, you really can't answer the other question. If you can answer the other question, you can't answer the first question. Not honest to yourself, you can't. So if you can answer the question who aged, then you can't answer the question what aged, because you don't see it that way. If you can answer the question what aged, then you can't answer the question who aged, because you can't see it that way. In other words, your perspective has changed. What I'm asking you to do is to try and think in terms of what this body really is. Is this body you? Or is this body something your mind uses to get its job done? As I said, is it not a tool? Is it not an instrument? Some equipment? A device that the mind uses to get its job done? Are you a girl or a boy? You can either answer that question or you can't answer that question. If you've understood what I'm saying, you're thinking, why can't I answer that question? I mean, that's such a simple question. I can answer that question. I can speak. I know the language. I know what you asked me. Yes, I'm a boy or I'm a girl. That's not what I mean. That is not what I mean. Technically speaking, you shouldn't be able to answer the question, are you a girl or are you a boy? You shouldn't be able to. But if the answer to that question comes to you very naturally, and you're even wondering, scratching your head wondering, is Swaminathan on something today? What's gone on with him? Are they not having dana at the monastery these days? Is he famished? Maybe he's just losing his mind. No, it's fine. I've had lunch and everything's fine. Don't worry. But I want you to think about this. Why am I even posing these questions to you? Are you a boy or are you a girl? Are you a man or a woman? Are you male or female? To answer that question, you'll probably look at yourself in the mirror and then you'll tell me, Swaminathan, yes, I'm a boy. I've got all the boy parts, so I'm a boy. I've got all the girl parts, so I'm a girl. No, my question was, who are you? Who are you? I didn't ask if your body is a body of a girl or a boy. I asked, who are you? Do you not actually feel you're a boy? Do you not feel male? Do you not feel female? Just because your body is that of a male? Just because your body is that of a female, doesn't your self feel that you are a female or a male accordingly? This is also a magic bullet for those of you who are fighting with sensual desire. It's such a strong medicine. It's a strong drug. If you're fighting with sensual desire, if that is one of those defilements that you're really struggling with, this is a very strong drug. If you can understand what I'm saying though. If you can't understand what I'm saying, then you're gonna have to take some drugs tonight to cure the headache. But if you can understand what I'm saying, then this is going to be the drug that cures a lot of your ailments, including sensual desire. Think about it there, right? You know, we have come to accept that it is normal for a man to look at a woman and feel excited, to find that to find it attractive. Can you spot the error in what I just said there? For a man to look at a woman and find her attractive. Who's the man? Who's the woman? Again, these pauses are giving you time to think, because it is possible that you've never thought about yourself or the world or others in this way. So this is a new way of thinking, which is why I'm not bombarding things, statements one after the other at you. I'm giving you time to think. You know, if you can't understand any of this, just think about, why is Swaminathan talking about this? What he must be onto something. I'm just not getting it. So continue to reflect. What do I mean by this? See, let's go back to where we started. We started with getting you to sit on a chair right opposite you. Right? So we had your carbon copy, your mirror image, sat down in front of you. This was you after all. Okay? And then I asked you the question, is what you're seeing in front of you, you? Is that you? Is that yourself? Your initial reactions would have been yes. So then I proposed some arguments, some of which were, well, if that is you, if what you're looking at is you, what if you lost a limb? Are you less you now than you used to be? If that is yourself, is that less yourself than used to be? Because not only the notion, but also the entire experience of a self has been completely removed from the mind of an arahant. The moment he or she becomes an arahant, that is one of the last of the fetters to be removed. So, in which case, if a man with less limbs than another is less of a self than the other, then less self means they are closer to Nibbana. And by the same token, someone who is smaller in size, so a child is more an arahant than a grown-up. But you know that makes no sense, because you know that becoming an arahant has everything to do with the mind and cleansing the mind, and it has zero to do with the body. So then what has the body got to do with the self? And then I think you would have said, well, okay, I get that. So this body is not the self, I get that. Again, my question back to you is then, why do you get offended when someone says, you're short than average, you're shorter than average? Why do you get offended when someone says, you're fat? Why does that offend you? Or when someone says, you've aged a bit, haven't you? Why does the world invest so much in a lot, particularly women, but also nowadays men? Right? Cosmetics is a massive industry. Most of cosmetics is to actually cover up signs of what? You know it. Signs of old age. Just think about the last time you saw an advert on TV. Right? Whether that's shampoo. You know, in shampoo, right? Okay, conditioner. Take conditioner for a moment. If you watch an advert for a conditioner, and how do they advertise this? Right? For you to have silky hair. That's what they say. Silky hair. And then they show, a girl walks into a room with this hair this wavy hair flowing from her head, and it's glistening. It's never like that, but it's glistening. And then everyone looks at her from across the room. People drop the things that they were holding in their hands. And then they see this woman, this girl or this lady, this woman, and then they begin to appreciate. You look so beautiful. And that's how she finds her soulmate. And then they get married and they live happily ever after. But besides that, think about what these adverts are trying to tell you. In other words, why are people buying and selling these products? Why is the cosmetics industry such a massive industry? Think about the things you have on your dressing table. Remember the last time you took me home? Oh yeah, we avoided the dressing table, didn't we? Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah. You didn't take me to the dressing table because you were ashamed of what questions Swami Wahanse might ask you. But in all fairness, right? Mentally go in front of your dressing table. Look at all the things you have in there. Now, I'm not by any means saying stop using any of those things. That's not for me to say, and that's not for you to do either, because if you live in a world where it's polite to look a certain way, then of course that is how much you must look. But are you using such things because that is what is expected of you, or are you using those products because that is how you want others to see you? An arahant brushes his teeth, of course he does. If we were permitted to have hair, right, the Buddha declared that upon ordination, we must shave our heads. But if we were permitted to have hair on our heads, how do you think an arahant might have his hair? Given that one of the Buddha's commands to the Mahasangha was that you must always conduct yourself so that those who come across you, those who see you, those who witness you and your behaviors are impressed by the Sambuddha Shasana. You leave a positive impression on them, not a negative one. Never leave a negative impression on laity, on the lay people, or others for that matter. Not only humans, devas and others as well. Never leave a negative impression on others. Always leave a positive impression. So this is a command from the Buddha. So, and towards that he laid out various codes of discipline as well. That's not the subject of our talk today. But what I'm saying is, if we were permitted to have hair on our heads, or if it was deemed that we had to have head in our heads, if we had to have hair on our heads, then I would like to imagine that an arahant would comb his hair. He would brush it. He would wash it. May not use conditioner, but he will wash his hair, keep it tidy, and he'll probably comb his hair, brush it, and make it look presentable. He's not going to walk around with disheveled hair. I cannot imagine an arahant would do that. Not because that's how he wants others to appreciate him, but because that is what he has to do, because that is what is expected of everyone. In society, in civil society, you need to be polite. Excuse me. And there's a certain decorum that we all have to abide by. Okay, so going back to your dressing table, you'll probably think, thankfully Swaminathan forgot my dressing table. No, I didn't forget. Going back to your dressing table, all those things you have on there, your cosmetics, your hair straighteners, your hair curlers, right, and those sprays that you once sprayed on the hair, it makes your hair feel like cement, it's been cemented, right? All those products, both men and women, right? They all use this stuff, right? So my question is then, why do you use them? And then other things like Botox. Not buttocks, Botox. Where these procedures that people use to make their skin taut when it starts to get all saggy because of old age. There may be other reasons why people use them. I don't know, medical reasons perhaps. But the context that I've heard them being used is in the context of looking good. And looking good becomes more difficult once you start to age. So people will be interested in using these things to preserve their youthful look. Hair implants. I mean, that's the new thing these days, isn't it? Hair implants for men. Hair implants. Why are people so interested in that? What about coloring your hair? Why do people color their hair? By the way, this is not me saying it's right or wrong. I have no say in it. I frankly don't. What's wrong is Raga, Dvesha, Moha. That's what's wrong. Nothing else is wrong. Raga, Dvesha, Moha? Oh, wrong. By every sense of the word, it's wrong. Coloring your hair? I don't have an opinion on that. But my point is, I'm asking you, because you know why you colored your hair if you have done so. Either now or in the past, or if you're planning on doing so in the future. What about tattoos? I really hope you're not being offended by the things I'm saying today. That is genuinely not my intention. Please don't think of it that way. As I said, I have no I have no stereotypes against any personal preferences and how you want to keep your bodies. Seriously, I really frankly don't have any opinions about that. As I said, what's wrong is raga, dvesha, moha, desire, aversion and delusion. Nothing else is wrong. I mean, nothing else I have an opinion about. Let's put it that way. Desire, aversion and delusion, it's wrong whether you like it or not. Nothing else I have an opinion on. Okay, but people do these things. And studs, then bracelets, anklets, earrings, no studs, tattoos, and the various types of ways that people wear their hair, some straight, some curly, some in braids, excuse me, some color it, some don't color it. Bringing it all back to one place, right? Is this not because people feel that the way their bodies look is a huge part of who they are, a massive part of who they are, the way they look? Is it you that look that way, or is it your body that looks that way? And if it's your body that looks that way, then is that not someone saying, someone considering, and someone accepting and acknowledging that the body is themselves? This is me. This body is me. But did we not prove at the beginning of the sermon that the body cannot be you? That cannot be yourself. It cannot be the self. So do you see now there's a disparity here? What we proved at the beginning and what we are seeing people around the world doing, there seems to be a huge disparity, a mismatch. So I want you to think about this. So is the body the self then? Let's come back to the question I asked you right at the beginning of this discussion. So you're back on the chair, right? Who's on the chair? Or instead should I be asking, what's on the chair? If you can begin to see, reflect, and by see I mean see through wisdom, right, through your mind's eye. If you can begin to see your body as simply an instrument, a device, a piece of equipment, a tool, that for the time being, within parentheses, the mind, aka the self, we'll talk about that in a future sermon, whether actually the mind is the self or not. But let's say for now that the mind is the self, or at least where the mind is where the self lives. Then this body can only be something that the mind uses to achieve its needs and wants. Because through our discussion we have managed to discover that the body cannot be the self. This may be a little heavy, right, what we have talked about today, and I would urge you to go back and re-listen to this. Even if you did understand, it would still be helpful, I would argue. Even if you got everything I explained to you there, I would still suggest you go back and listen to the sermon again, at least once. Because what you understood is what you understood. It may not necessarily be what I tried to explain to you. Because the thing is, I know what I'm going to say next, but you don't know what I'm going to say next. So, if you, when you, and that is, why we say listen to some of these sermons a few times, because once you've gone through it the first time, now that's when you're hearing things for the first time. So then you are unable to connect what was said right at the beginning to what was said at the end, potentially. But once you listen to it 2 or 3 times, now you know what's coming later. Therefore, you're able to connect what is said at the beginning, and therefore, now you're able to connect the dots much more easily than if you only listen to a sermon once. So there's solid evidence and there's meaning and essence in the ask that we make of you, which is to listen to a sermon, particularly at least the ones that I do remind at the end. Listen to it one more time at least. So let's summarize what we talked about there. Just remind ourselves again. What did we talk about there? Right at the beginning, I asked you about if you'd done your timetable. Hopefully you have done. But then we went on to talk about the core of what we have discussed today. I asked you to imagine another self, which is an exact copy of yourself. Sit them right in front of you, opposite to you. And then we observed this new person. And then I asked you, is that yourself? Or actually I asked you, who's seated on the chair? Who's on the chair? Who's seated on the chair? Chances are you answered, I am seated on the chair. It's me. That's me. I'm sat on the chair. So that is myself. That is me. So then we talked about, well, what if we started to do things to the body that you see on the chair? Like chop limbs off, shave the hair, give it a wash, remove all the dead skin cells, or trim nails, empty the bowels. Right, so you can see you're not going to feel any different about yourself through any of these changes. What if you had to go on through a heart transplant? Is that a new self now? Is that not yourself anymore? I mean, come on, that's like a vital organ that's just been replaced, right? Heart. Or what if you want one of your kidneys? So you had a kidney failure, one of your kidneys had to be removed. Or if you had an appendectomy. Do you feel less of a self now? With no appendix? If you do, then some of you was in the appendix. I mean, if that were the case, then more parts they chop off of you, the closer you become, you get to becoming an arahant. So the Buddha could not have said, Ekayano ayam bhikkhave maggo sattanam visuddhya. Monks, I deem there is only one path to salvation. He did not, he could not have said that, because then we have just discovered that there's another way. To start chopping parts of the body off, and then you get closer to becoming an arahant, because the self is in the body. Right, so hopefully you can see what I'm trying to explain to you here, that the self cannot be in the body. So when you go and, if I ask you, how much do you weigh? What do? You get on the weighing scale. Remember when as children we had those charts, body weight charts? Most of you would have had one, body weight charts. And you would weigh your baby. Or if you had a chart that you would plot your weight, perhaps let's say you were working on, getting yourself fit, maybe, or perhaps your doctor said lose X number of kilos and you were working towards that goal. Okay, so whenever you lost a kilo or whenever your baby gained weight, when actually the baby gets delivered, what's one of the first things that you tell everyone? The baby came safe and weighs this much, right? This many pounds, this many kilos. It's one of the things that gets said, because it's a healthy baby. A healthy baby is a baby that weighs this much. So is the baby healthy? Is the baby healthy, or is the baby's body healthy? So who's the baby then? Actually, whose baby is it? Are you confused, or are you confused? It's fine. Just take it one step at a time. One baby step at a time. Right? So, ask yourself, who's that sat on the chair? Is that yourself? We start cutting bits of the body off. Do you feel less of a self now? It cannot be the case, because if that were the case, then, by the time you've taken a kidney off, you become a sotapanna. By the time you take the appendix off, that's a sakrudagami. 2 of the limbs off and now you're an anagami. Chop all 4 off and now you're an arahant. So surely that cannot be the case. And then, you won't have the Paralympics. You'd have the Arahat Olympics. Because, when people start losing limbs of the body, they get, Aryan Olympics. Because there'd be Aryans every time they lost a part of their body. Surely. Of course, we know that that is not the case. Right? So the body has nothing to do with this fabrication. Problem being that when you are now ready to accept this, you will now begin to ask yourself, well, why the hell then did I get offended when someone pointed out that grey hair on my head? So why do you then try to cover up those grey hairs? Why do you color them? Why do you dye your hair? Why are you so concerned about the skin on your face starting to become saggy? If you have a big belly, are you concerned about it only because it affects your body health, or are you concerned about it because about the way you look? The way who looks? The way you look? So is that you? As in, is that yourself? Silence is time to think. In fact, I'm going to be silent for another week to give you time to think. So in the course of the next week, then, find some time to listen to this sermon again. Now you're listening to the second time. If you listen to this stream live, then you're listening to the second time. And as you listen to it, I want you to think deeply about yourself. When you go stand in front of the mirror today, perhaps as you're doing yourself up to go somewhere, or perhaps as you're brushing your teeth in the morning and look yourself in the mirror, do you genuinely not feel that you're looking at yourself? I want you to start to think in a different way. I want you to start to look at what you see in the mirror as the body that you use. This is the body that you use to get done the things you want to get done. It's a body that you use. Like, this is the umbrella I use. This is the car I use. This is the toothbrush I use. Look at everything else you have in the bathroom. As you're brushing your teeth, the toothbrush, that's the toothbrush I use. Instead of saying it's my toothbrush, in all honesty, is that not the toothbrush that you use? Oh, I say, because if you go on a weekend holiday or go and stay in a hotel, or if you're flying, then they give you this little vanity pack, right, where they give a little toothbrush and a tub of toothpaste. So at that moment in time, you wouldn't say that's my toothbrush, would you? That little toothbrush they give you on the plane or in a hotel, and you're just gonna use it for the night, right? You don't feel like saying that's my toothbrush, because you feel that this is the toothbrush that has been left in the bathroom, in the toilet, for you to use for the duration of your stay. Duration of your stay where? Duration of your stay in the hotel. What about the brush that they give you on the plane? On the flight. That's the brush that they give for your use during a flight. You're not going to bring that home and then brush for the rest of the month with that. You can hardly brush with it, right? So you are quite happy to think of that brush as the brush that you use for the duration of your flight. Now what about your body then? Is that not the body that's been given to you to use for the duration of your stay here? Isn't that the truth, rather than thinking of it as your body, or as you think right now, this is me? Is your body you? Or is that the body that you use for the duration of your stay here? You're only here for a few nights. You know that's the truth. You're only here for a few nights. In the grand scheme of things, it's a few nights. So really, that what you're seeing on the chair? Who's that on the chair? No. What is that on the chair? It's what I'm using. It's the body that I'm using for the duration of my stay here. If you can begin to think of your body in those terms, ladies and gentlemen, I tell you, this is a very, very powerful medicine for a whole host of ailments, mental ailments. Today the problem is, Corona seems to be bringing people down, both physically and guess what? Mentally. Corona should not be able to affect your mind, because it's not an infection of the mind. It's an infection of the body that you use, that has been given to you to use for the duration of your stay. Once you're ready to leave the hotel, you don't need to worry a bit, not the tiniest, about the thing that you're leaving behind. Just like that little piece of soap, that soap bar that was given to you when you went and stayed overnight at the hotel, that little toothbrush that was given to you, the towels that were given to you to use during your stay, right? You didn't have any thoughts about what state it was going to be in when you left the hotel, because you knew very well that this is just here for me to use for the duration of my stay. Your body, I tell you then, has been given to you to use for the duration of your stay. A few nights. So what is all the fuss about? What is all the fuss about? Corona seems to be affecting people more mentally than it seems to be affecting people physically. It's because when you ask someone, who does Corona affect? It affects me. That's why. Not just corona, all the other ailments out there. What about cancer? Who does cancer affect? Me? Or body that I have been given to use for the duration of my stay? What about the common cold? What about a heart attack? Who does that affect? You? What about old age? Old age, disease, illness. In the Arya Maitreya, there's a portion of that says, "May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the suffering of disease, decay, death." This is what we're really talking about. The Buddha and Arahants who came after him were free from the suffering of disease, decay and death not after they passed into Parinibbana, the moment they became Arahants. Of course, I'm not talking about the physical suffering. Because the Dhamma can't cure that. Time does that. All you need to do is allow time to break your body up into pieces, and then that's it. But we are talking, Buddhism is about medicine for the mind. Buddhism is not medicine for the body, Buddhism is medicine for the mind. In treating the mind, you can indirectly treat the pains of the body. Because when you have no body, then how can disease, decay and death affect you? That's the physical aspect. But to have no body, you have to not want a body. To not want a body, you have to be cured mentally. That is the only way you can not want a body. Because wanting a body is not a physical bodily requirement. Wanting a body is a mental requirement. It's a mental need. And that can only be cured through mental medicine. Medicine for the mind. That is what Buddhist philosophy is. So you see, try and over the course of next week, as you spend the rest of the next week, right, as you get out of bed in the morning, ask yourself, who is this getting out of bed? Who? As I said, you can only answer one of these two questions. Who's getting out of bed? What is getting out of bed? If you can answer the first question, then the second question makes no sense to you. If you can answer the second question, then the first question makes no sense to you. That's the way it is. So when you get out of bed, ask yourself, who's getting out of bed? If this sermon has made sense to you, you will immediately start to switch. You will immediately switch your thinking. You go, I see, no. What's getting out of bed? Then walk to the bathroom. Now you need to go, to the toilet. Brush your teeth. Wash up. Right? As you brush your teeth, ask yourself, who's brushing teeth? If you can answer that question, the next question does not make sense. What's brushing teeth? As in, not what does brushing teeth mean. I mean, what is it that's brushing its teeth? What if it was a robot that was doing it? Ultimately, is it not a machine that you're using? This body? It's a machine. You're using a machine to get done the things you want to get done. The things that you want to do, you're using a machine that is the body to get done. So the question really should not be who is, it should really be what is. Reflect on this, listen to the sermon once again, and it will begin to make more sense than it does now. Whether this has made sense to you or not, if you listen to it another time, it will make more sense. Okay? So I would ideally have done this sermon with you present in the room, but I think for a number of reasons. One being Corona, and two being, this is a time where the demon of sensual desire will be out to get you, and I don't want you becoming prey to the demon of sensual desire. Okay, and particularly in this day and time, or rather, during this period, it'll be the sensual demon to do with the fifth sense. That's the sense of touch. Not only, but also. And it can be others. If you just want to study yourself, this is the last thing I say before I conclude today's sermon. If you really want to study yourself and see how you reacted to this period of time, go back and browse your browsing history. Check your browsing history. Unless you habitually delete your browsing history. Otherwise, you go back and check your browsing history. Or since the Corona pandemic hit you, that will really give you a retrospective idea about how you react to things. Oh God, your YouTube history. See what you can find out about yourself. Look at the things you Googled. Look at some of the things you watched. Go back and check your history. YouTube does a good job of capturing your watch history. Again, I think by default it's on. You can switch it off if you want to. Right? Go back and check your watch history on YouTube. Not now, after the sermon, please. See what you can find out about yourself. I would argue, I would bet that quite a few people, maybe not those who are listening to the sermon today, but those who will listen to the sermon in 10 years' time, maybe, okay, will realize that during a time where you are confined to your four walls, as I said, again, that is another word for on the sofa in front of the TV, right? When you're confined to your four walls, your mind will run to sensual desire. It will run towards sensuality, because that is the default behavior of all sensual beings. Some of the things you will go back and check in your watch history, I tell you, you will be ashamed of. If you do so after listening to this sermon, you will be ashamed of. Some of you may have typed on YouTube, how do you make vegetable roti at home? How do you make pudding at home? Why? Because you can't go out and get it now, so you have to make it at home. Some might think, well, what's there to be ashamed about? Yeah, okay. But you know what I mean if you know what I mean. Right? The things that your mind wanted. Yeah, you weren't like this. That's the thing. You didn't used to be like this. Before you came into the sensual world, you would have puked at the thought that you needed vegetable roti after you have already had a filling lunch. For tea, you wanted vegetable roti. You would have puked at the thought. You would have been sick at the thought when you were once a Brahma who lived in the form sphere. But today, to keep you happy, when you are confined to your four walls, you need to go and, because you can't go out to the restaurant and get it, you need to go on YouTube and type in how to make vegetable roti at home. How to make vade at home. How to make vatalappang at home. Go back and check your YouTube history and see what you can find out about yourself. Check your Google history. your search history, see what you can find out about yourself. You get your download history, see what you can find out about yourself in the downloads folder. Would you be proud if would you like Swami Mahansa to check it for you? I doubt it. Again, you will realize, if you haven't done so already, this is not you doing this is ignorance and attachment. Okay, if you haven't realized it already, hidden amongst the videos and the search terms on your internet browsing history, you should be clever enough, you should be intelligent and wise enough to spot ignorance and attachment. Time and time again. Well, all you need to do is find it and then treat it. So, I think I would like to ask you to do that as a piece of homework. Go back and check your YouTube history over the last several weeks. Since you had to stay at home, working from home, check your YouTube or Google history. See what you can find out about yourself. Because after all, isn't that what Buddhist philosophy is for? Isn't that what Buddhism is for? To find out about myself or yourself? You know the answer. And alongside that, try and answer this question of who is that on the chair? As you brush your teeth, ask yourself the question, who's brushing their teeth? Now, who's brushing teeth? When you sit on the toilet, who's sitting on the toilet? When you're eating, who's eating? Who's eating? If you have understood what I have tried to explain to you today, immediately you will switch from, it's not who's eating, it's what is eating. Even the question doesn't make sense, I know. What is eating does not make sense. I mean, what are you eating? You might even correct me. So I'm going to say it's not what is eating, it's what are you eating. Now, you might even correct me on my grammar. But that's because you haven't understood what I have said, what I have tried to explain to you here. So go back and ask yourself, right? And when you're watching TV, ask yourself, who's watching TV? And then when you begin to feel sensual desires about something or someone, perhaps when you go back to your search history, you might find some things you're not too proud about, or things that you would not share with anyone that you know. Now, this is your secrets. These are your secrets, right? So, but you know what I mean by this. When you watch that, when you go through that, and you ask yourself, or you're reminded of the things you watched, either on YouTube or any other sites, right? When you're reminded about the things you watched, maybe you saw people doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Ask yourself, who was it that was doing it? Who did I see doing that with the other? Who? Was it who? Or was it what? Then you will realize that sensual desire is a complete madness. You will realize that these sensual desires which have been haunting you, giving you sleepless nights, waking you up in the middle of the night, keeping you from focusing on the work you needed to do and distracting you, and making you do things that you later on regretted, and ask yourself, why did I succumb to it? You will find some answers to those questions. If you can continue to focus on this enough times, I tell you, that urge you feel or you felt to type in that website into your browser, which before you typed in, you checked around to make sure no one else was at home, or you had to open your incognito, private browsing. You know all that stuff, right? All that stuff you had to do. You will begin to realize, what was I doing? Because you thought you were going onto those sites to look at the who's, doing what with the who's. You begin to understand, actually no, it was what's, doing what's with what's. And then when that happens, you will be free. You will be free. After all, that is what Buddhism is for. To become a free man. To find your freedom. To find your salvation. To be liberated. Towards a day that sensual desires can no longer pester you. To a day that sensual desires can no longer give you sleepless nights. Towards a day when sensual desires will no longer burn you from the inside and tear you up from the inside. That is the day that you will be free. Okay, so that's quite a bit of homework to be doing over the course of the next week. But if you do it, I tell you, you will find answers to a lot of your problems. Okay, so on that note, we will conclude the sermon today. Let us transfer the merits that we have all acquired today to those who are needing of merits. And I'm also reminded that, of course, this is the last sermon before the Sinhala New Year, the Sinhala and Tamil New Year, that we have coming up at the start of next week. This New Year is going to be different to other New Years because of all that's going on these days. But so it may be that again you will have less time running around, visiting people, and more time to yourself. I would ask you to engage in the New Year customs as much as you possibly can, and obviously keeping in line with the stipulations that have been laid out by the authorities. So please don't overstep the mark, given all that they're trying to do to thwart the pandemic. But of course, at the same time, this is a time where people can. It's a time where people can actually heal old wounds, old grudges and bad feelings, ill feelings that people had towards each other. It's a really good time to settle them. If you can't go visit your friends and family, nothing's stopping you from picking up the phone. This is a really good time to heal each other, or rather heal yourself by healing the other. So give them a call and say, all that was said last year, it's just water under the bridge. Let's not. I'm sorry about what happened. I didn't mean it when I said that. Right? Let's just forget all that stuff. Let's just be friends again. And just ask around. See if they're doing okay. Give them a call. If you can't go and see them, if you can. I don't know what the state of affairs will be over the next few days, but if you're allowed to travel, then do so. And but always keeping in line with any local or enforcements, curfews and things like that. Just make sure you don't overstep the mark, but at the same time make use of the Sinhala and Tamil New Year to mend old broken hearts and to become a better person in the new year. From the monastery, we will have a very modest program, which is because we are still acknowledging and we are keeping in line with the customs, as we always do. So we will share with you details of that. You can join with us at the auspicious times, and we'll be sharing details of that in future announcements, so keep an eye out for that. You'll probably be getting a few announcements over the course of today. Nothing grand, given the somber nature of the affairs, the state of affairs, but we will be doing what we need to be doing at the monastery, and we will give every opportunity for you to join us as well, including the Arya Maitreya and maybe chanting Pirith and so on. So it will be a great opportunity, because people worldwide, at least Sri Lankans worldwide, who celebrate the New Year will all have their thoughts and wishes towards one aim. That will be a prosperous future, a better future for all. So it's a time when everyone can join hands and come together for the benefit of all of us. So make use of that opportunity, but at the same time, understand that New Year's will come and go. This is yet another one. What will not come what will go and not come again will probably be your human life, your human birth. So make sure that you put your human life to best use. And from everyone at the monastery, we wish you all a new year in which you will be able to move forwards on your path to Nibbana. May this be the new year in which you will become Sotapannas if you have not yet attained that state. May this be the new year, the upcoming new year, be the new year in which you will be able to fulfill the subsequent stages on your path to your salvation. And may this be the new year in which you will be able to rid your mind of all the defilements and experience and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. So that is the wish from all of us, including Guru Swamin Wahanse and all the other monks, as well as the Anagarikas at the monastery, to all of you. Okay, so let us chant the merits and bring the sermon to a close. First and foremost then, let us all take a moment to remind ourselves that it is because of the Supreme Buddha, the Perfect One, the Omniscient One, the Magnificent One, the Immaculate One, the Supremely Enlightened One, the Victorious One, that we have the gift of Dhamma today. It is because of the Bhikkhu Bhikkhunis, Upasaka Upasikas, who since time immemorial protected and preserved the teaching of the Buddha and passed it down through the generations in the form of the Tripitaka as well as in the noble lineage. Let us take a moment to transfer merits to all of them. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to the monks and nuns who are resident in your local temples and nunneries, as well as Guru Swamin Wahanse and all the other monks resident at this monastery, as well as the Anagarikas and the Anagarikas who are attached to the monastery, as well as everyone else throughout the world who strive day and night to attain their salvation, people just like yourselves. Let us transfer merits to all of them, and may through the power of these merits, if any of them have today been born in the woeful states, may they be able to redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to our parents, siblings, teachers, and various other relations, kith and kin who have always been there by our side, come rain or shine, who have done whatever they could do in their capacity to help us, support us, and assist us. May they all be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to the Devas, Brahmas, spirits, demons, and the dead, those who have predeceased us, and including the Devas who have made it their lifelong obligation to protect and preserve the Sambuddha Shasana. May they forever and perpetually be able to do so. May through the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in the woeful states, be able to redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to members of the armed forces, as well as those who lost their lives in the wars that we had in our country, as well as those who have lost their lives in the recent pandemic, and also to those members of the armed forces, members of the health forces, or the health service rather, and various other authorities throughout the world, and the general population who have been working extremely hard to help each other and to save lives, to cure each other, and to be as helpful as they can be in the face of this threat that all of humanity has faced on this occasion. May all these merits help them all. If any of them have been born in the woeful plains, may through the power of these merits they redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plain. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let's also take a moment, finally, to transfer merits to all men and women who have made it their duty and obligation to serve our country, to lead our country, to develop our nation, and to safeguard our nation. It is thanks to them that today you and I are able to live in peace and harmony, in the comforts of our homes, and as they have taken on their shoulders the burden and the duty and the responsibility of keeping our country safe in the face of various man-made and other disasters and calamities. May they all be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. And finally, may through the power of all the merits that we have all acquired today, we be able to witness the advent of many hundreds of thousands of Arahatun Vahanses in this blessed land, in our very lives itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may through the power of all the merits that we have all acquired today, you and I, and everyone who has contributed to making this event a success, in any way, shape or form, either by spreading the word, making you aware of the Dhamma sermons, transliterating these sermons, or joining these sermons either in person or online, may they all be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana by becoming an Arahatun Vahanse, an Arahat Mehinin Vahanse, in this life itself and in the era of the Gautama Supreme Buddha itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. The members of the Mahasangha will now transfer their blessings to you. Raga ginnen midetva, Desha ginnen midetva, Moha ginnen midetva, Nibbana parama sukhayen Sukhita taravetva, Nibbana parama sukhayen Sukhita taravetva. Mamada siyalu loka siyalu satvayo, Nibbana parama sukhayen Sukhita taravetva, Nibbana parama sukhayen Sukhita taravetva, Nibbana parama sukhayen Sukhita taravetva. Raga gini niveva, Dvesha gini niveva, Moha gini niveva, Nivan sapa labeva, Nivan sapa labeva, Nivan sapa labeva. තුනුරුවන්ගේ සුවිසි අනන්ත මහා ගුණ බෙලෙන් සීල ලෝක සීල සත්වයෝම නිබ්බාන පරම සුඛයෙන් සුඛිතතර වෙත්වා. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of desire. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of aversion. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of delusion. May I and all beings in all worlds attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. May the noble triple gem be with you all forever. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. The sermon will conclude now. May the noble triple gem